Human rescues alien girl from a sinking crawler, uncovering a beacon shaped after human. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Ethan Wood, a seasoned engineer, stood at the edge of the canyon, staring at the enormous crawler that was slowly sinking into the shifting sands. The air was thick with the heat of the alien desert, the wind carrying a fine layer of dust that stung his skin. The crawler, a massive, mechanical behemoth that once roamed the terrain, was now nothing more than a dying titan, its engine sputtering in a desperate attempt to stay afloat. Ethan's heart raced as he knew that every second counted. He had been on countless rescue missions before, but this was different. There, amidst the wreckage, was a figure struggling against the sinking vessel. A young alien girl, her bright blue skin shining under the harsh sun, was fighting to hold on. Her delicate arms were wrapped around a metal beam, but with every passing moment, the sand beneath her seemed to swallow her more and more. Ethan's instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the crawler, his boots kicking up a cloud of dust as he fought against the wind. He reached the girl just as she began to slip beneath the surface. "Hold on," he shouted, extending his hand. Her eyes, wide with fear, locked onto his. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two beings from different worlds, yet united by a single, desperate need. Without another word, Ethan grabbed her arm and pulled with all his strength. The girl screamed as the sand tried to pull her back, but Ethan wasn't about to let go. His muscles burned as he hauled her up and away from the crawler, but the weight of the sinking machine was too much. They barely made it a few feet before the crawler's engine sputtered one last time, and with a roar, it sank fully into the sands, taking with it any hope of retrieving it. Ethan stumbled backward, dragging the girl to safety as the crawler disappeared beneath the desert floor. They collapsed onto the solid ground, gasping for air. The girl looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft yet powerful. Ethan smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "You're welcome," he said, still trying to catch his breath. "Let's get you out of here." As he helped her to her feet, his eyes scanned the horizon. There, just on the edge of his vision, something glowed, a beacon, shaped in the form of a human. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but there was no mistaking it. This beacon, carved from the very sand and rock, looked like it had been waiting for him. A signal, he realized, one that could change everything. But for now, he had a new priority, getting the girl to safety. Little did he know, this simple rescue would unravel a mystery that would take them both on a journey beyond the stars, one that would challenge everything they knew about their worlds, their species, and the bonds that tied them together. As Ethan helped Zara to her feet, he could feel her body trembling, not just from the cold desert wind but from the shock of the close call. Her bright blue skin, now slightly dusted with sand, was a stark contrast to the golden hues of the desert stretching endlessly around them. The air felt thick, the sun still high in the sky despite the sinking crawler being the only thing on Ethan's mind for the moment. They stood together in a silence that seemed to stretch across the landscape, both of them unsure of what to do next. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice low and steady as he kept his hand lightly on her arm, offering some semblance of comfort. Zara nodded slowly, her alien eyes searching his face as if she were trying to understand the man who had just saved her life. I think so," she murmured, her voice soft but tinged with exhaustion. She took a deep breath, attempting to steady herself, and glanced at the wreckage behind them. The crawler had disappeared into the sand, leaving no trace of its existence except for the faintest ripple in the ground. It was gone, along with whatever secrets it may have held. Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. The mission was a failure, the wreckage lost to the desert. But Zara, she was alive, and that was what mattered. He gave her a reassuring smile, trying to push away the gnawing feeling of failure. "Come on," he said, motioning toward the distant horizon where a small outpost appeared to be located. Let's get you somewhere safe. We can figure this out. Zara's eyes flickered toward the direction he pointed, and for the first time, she seemed to let her guard down just a little. Thank you, she whispered again, as though the words were insufficient to convey the depth of her gratitude. Ethan gave a small nod, turning to lead the way. They walked together, side by side, with the desert stretching endlessly before them. The silence between them was comfortable now, the tension from before dissipating slowly as they made their way toward the outpost. Ethan's mind, however, was far from peaceful. The beacon, what was it? He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just unfolded, something far bigger than the simple mission he had been sent on. It was as though that beacon, the one shaped like a human figure, was calling to him. Was it a message? Or a warning? His thoughts raced, but he didn't voice them. It wasn't the time. Zara needed him now, and he wasn't about to lose focus. As they reached the outpost, a small, squat building with solar panels dotted around it, Ethan felt the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. The outpost was a welcome sight, though it was clear that this place wasn't much more than a supply station, built to withstand the harsh desert environment. A few alien figures moved about, unloading crates from transports and carrying out repairs. As they approached, one of the workers looked up, his sharp eyes narrowing at the sight of Zara. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, but Zara, for once, seemed unbothered. She moved forward with purpose, her head held high, a stark contrast to the vulnerable state she had been in just moments ago. "We need shelter," Ethan said to the worker, his voice firm. The worker nodded without question, stepping aside to allow them entry. Inside, the temperature was cooler, a welcome relief from the heat outside. Ethan led Zara to a nearby table, where she immediately sat down, her posture still tense from the ordeal. Ethan checked the room around them, making sure they were alone, and then turned to face her. "Zara," he began, his voice serious, "what exactly was that beacon?" "The one shaped like a human." Zara paused, her eyes dropping to the floor as though she were gathering her thoughts. For a long moment, she said nothing, but finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "It's a sign," she said, her words weighed with a mix of reverence and sorrow. "A sign that something is coming, something big." Ethan leaned in, listening intently. The implications of her words hit him like a jolt. He had no idea what she meant, but he could feel that this was the beginning of something far larger than he had ever imagined. A new chapter was unfolding, and the path ahead would be anything but ordinary. The hum of the outpost's cooling system filled the quiet space around them, a gentle vibration that seemed to settle the dust still clinging to Ethan's clothes. Zara sat across from him, her posture straight but her hands clasped tightly together, a contrast that told him she carried more fear than she wished to show. Outside the narrow window, the desert wind stirred the sand in slow spirals, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan leaned forward, keeping his voice low, steady, and calm. "Zara, you said the beacon is a sign." "A sign of what?" She hesitated, her bright blue eyes shifting toward the window as though the horizon itself might overhear her. "My people," she said softly, "believe that when the sands form an image of another species, it is not random. It is a message left behind by ancient forces. Forces older than any civilization we know." Ethan absorbed that quietly. He had heard of myths like this on distant planets, stories passed down through generations, but he had never expected to stumble into one himself. "And the fact that it was shaped like a human," he asked gently, "does that mean anything specific?" Zara inhaled slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means you were meant to find it." The words settled heavily between them, and Ethan felt a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion. He was not someone who believed in fate. He believed in work, in logic, in action. But the look in Zara's eyes told him this was not superstition. This was history. "Why me?" he asked. She looked at him then, really looked at him, as though she were searching for an answer in the lines of his face. "I do not know," she admitted. "But whatever that beacon was trying to reveal, it was not meant for my people." It was meant for yours. And now that you have seen it, there will be those who want to find out why. Ethan tried to process that, but before he could respond, the outpost door slid open with a soft hiss. A rush of cooler air pushed through the room as an outpost worker stepped inside, his expression unreadable. Supplies are stored. If you need anything, let us know, he said before turning away. Zara watched him leave, her shoulders relaxing only slightly once they were alone again. Ethan leaned back, rubbing a hand across his jaw as he considered the next step. Zara, before the crawler sank, did you see anything else? Anything that might explain why you were out there? She took a moment before answering, her fingers tightening again. I was following a transmission, she confessed quietly. A faint signal detected near the ridge. It was ancient, older than any technology my people have recorded. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The mention of an ancient signal made Ethan sit up straighter. Do you still have the coordinates? Zara nodded. Yes. They are stored in a backup device I managed to save before the crawler went under. She reached into a small pouch at her side, pulling out a compact silver disc no larger than Ethan's palm. The surface glowed softly, pulsing as though alive. Ethan's curiosity sharpened. Can you play it? Zara touched the center of the device, and a gentle holographic projection rose into the air. A grainy pattern appeared first, shifting and reforming until a faint silhouette emerged, tall, upright, undeniably human. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. That is the same shape I saw in the sands, he said quietly. Zara nodded. And the transmission came from the same direction. The projection flickered, distorted, then displayed a string of symbols neither of them recognized. I believe, Zara whispered, that whatever this is, it has been waiting for your kind for a very long time. Ethan exhaled, the weight of the revelation settling in. He did not know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing with certainty, whatever message the desert had revealed, he and Zara were now part of something far bigger than themselves. The holographic projection flickered again, casting soft shadows across the walls of the small outpost room. The human figure in the image seemed to be moving, a silhouette locked in some kind of ritualistic posture. Ethan's heart raced as he studied it. The details were scarce, but there was something undeniably familiar about the shape. It looked like him. But the longer he stared at it, the more disquieting it became. Zara's voice broke through the silence, her tone filled with uncertainty. This signal, it's older than any technology my people have encountered. It's like nothing we've seen before. Whatever this message is, it's tied to something much larger than our history, than even yours. Ethan nodded slowly, his mind racing. The connection between this mysterious signal and the human-shaped beacon was starting to feel like a thread that was about to unravel something far greater. The very thought of a message from a distant past, something that could hold the key to his species' future, was both terrifying and exhilarating. He could almost feel the weight of the universe pressing in on him. What do you think it means? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. Zara hesitated, her eyes locked on the projection. I don't know, she admitted, the vulnerability in her voice uncharacteristic for her. But I think it's a warning. And it's meant for you. For humans. Ethan furrowed his brow. A warning? From what? Who sent it? Zara's gaze shifted to meet his, her expression a mix of worry and something else, something more profound. I believe this beacon, it's a marker. A signal placed by an ancient civilization that once spanned the stars. They knew of your kind before anyone else. And they left this message for you, buried in the sands. Ethan felt a chill creep down his spine. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. What are we supposed to do with this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara looked at him, her blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. I think we're meant to follow it. We need to go to the source of the signal. It's the only way to understand what's coming. And what it means for you. Ethan took a step back, his mind struggling to catch up with the implications of her words. The idea of pursuing this unknown signal was as daunting as it was fascinating. Yet, deep inside, something stirred, an instinct telling him that this was the path they had to take. The wind outside howled softly, a reminder of the desolate world they were on. But for Ethan, it felt like the wind was whispering something else. Something calling him to a destiny he had never imagined. "How do we find it?" he asked, his resolve growing. Zara's hand moved to her side, where the small device with the coordinates was resting. She tapped it gently, and another projection popped into the air, a map, ancient and weathered, with symbols that were almost entirely foreign to him. "This is where we need to go," she said, pointing to a distant point on the map. Ethan squinted at the coordinates, seeing nothing but desert and rocky terrain. "That's far." Zara nodded. "It will be a journey. But I believe we must go." "You must go." Ethan stared at the map, feeling the weight of the decision settle in his chest. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous even, but there was no turning back now. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing: he wasn't going to face it alone. Not anymore. "Then we'll leave at first light," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. Zara nodded, a hint of relief crossing her features. "Thank you." Ethan smiled, though his mind was already miles away, racing ahead toward the unknown. The journey ahead would change everything. But for now, they would rest. Tomorrow, they would begin the journey that would uncover secrets buried in the sands, secrets that could alter the fate of not just their worlds, but the entire galaxy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in deep shades of orange and purple, Ethan and Zara stood at the edge of the small outpost. The cold desert air began to settle in, bringing with it a silence that was almost suffocating. Their supplies were packed, and everything was ready for the journey ahead. The distant stars began to twinkle, casting a soft glow over the barren landscape. "We leave at dawn," Ethan said, his voice calm, though there was a sense of urgency in the way he spoke. Zara nodded, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars above them. She had grown more distant since they had spoken of the signal, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that she was carrying a burden far heavier than he had initially realized. "You're sure this is the right path?" he asked, trying to read her expression. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked back at the desert, her gaze distant, as though she was searching for something out there in the vast emptiness. "I'm sure," she said finally, her voice steady. "But it's not just the path we're walking on that matters. It's what we find at the end." Ethan felt a chill run through him. There was something about her words that didn't sit right with him. He had known for a long time that he was walking into something unknown, but now, with her cryptic answer, the weight of the journey ahead felt heavier than ever. "What are we looking for, Zara?" he asked, his voice softer now. She turned to him, her eyes filled with an intensity that he hadn't seen before. "You will understand when we get there," she replied. Her words were final, leaving no room for further discussion. Ethan wanted to ask more, to understand what exactly they were walking into, but something in her tone told him that pressing for answers would only make things more difficult. So, he remained silent, nodding once, as if accepting her response. The night passed quietly, and the morning came with the first light of dawn. The outpost's workers were already busy, preparing for another day of routine tasks, but Ethan and Zara had their sights set on the horizon. As they began their trek across the desert, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting harsh shadows on the sand. The journey was long, and the terrain grew more difficult with each step. The path that Zara had marked out led them through rocky hills and across barren stretches of land that seemed to go on forever. Ethan didn't speak much as they walked, his focus on the terrain ahead, but Zara remained quiet too, her steps steady and sure. It wasn't until midday, when the heat became almost unbearable, that Zara finally spoke again. "We're close," she said, her voice calm despite the harsh conditions. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted the strap of her pack. It was subtle, but it was there. "Close to what?" he asked, his curiosity piqued once more. Zara stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. For the first time since they started the journey, she allowed herself a small smile, though it was weary and edged with a hint of something he couldn't quite place. "To the truth," she said simply. The word sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He didn't know what she meant, but he was beginning to understand that the truth was something that would change everything. They continued walking in silence, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the sand. As the hours passed, the landscape began to change. The terrain grew more uneven, with jagged rocks jutting out of the earth, their sharp edges casting long shadows. It was a stark contrast to the smooth, endless desert they had crossed earlier. Zara led the way, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. Ethan couldn't see it yet, but he trusted her judgment. They were getting closer. When the sun began to set again, painting the sky with streaks of red and purple, they reached their destination. A rocky outcrop loomed before them, and as they approached, Ethan could see the faint outline of something hidden in the shadows. It was a structure, ancient, worn by time, but unmistakably there. "This is it," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had no idea what to expect, but as they stepped closer, he felt the gravity of the moment. This place, whatever it was the key to everything. And the truth it held would change their lives forever. The rocky outcrop loomed larger as Ethan and Zara drew closer, the structure in the shadows now more visible. The air around them was thick with anticipation, each step carrying the weight of what was to come. Ethan could feel his heartbeat quicken as they reached the base of the structure. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, tall, angular, and etched with markings that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dimming light. There was no mistaking it, this was no natural formation. Zara, with her blue skin glowing faintly in the twilight, moved ahead, her steps purposeful, yet somehow cautious. She stopped at the entrance, her gaze scanning the worn stone, her eyes narrowing. "This is it," she said quietly, almost to herself. Ethan stepped up beside her, his eyes following the lines of the structure. The marking seemed to pulse, though it could have been just the fading light playing tricks on him. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara hesitated for a moment, then turned to face him. "This was once a temple," she said softly, "a place of knowledge, a library, perhaps. My people built it long before the stars were mapped, long before we even knew of humans." Ethan's eyes widened. He could feel the gravity of her words sinking in. "A library," he repeated, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "But why here?" Zara stepped forward, brushing her hand against the stone. "Because it was meant to be hidden. The knowledge here was too dangerous, too powerful for the wrong hands." She paused, her expression shifting. "I was sent here, long ago, by my people to find it, but I never understood why. I thought it was just a legend, until now." Ethan stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. If what she was suggesting was true, then they had just stumbled upon a piece of history that could change everything. "What kind of knowledge?" he asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Zara turned back toward the entrance, her eyes distant. "The kind that could reshape everything," she said. "The kind that humans and my people alike would never fully understand until the right time. And I believe that time is now." She stepped inside, and Ethan followed, the dark interior swallowing them as they ventured further into the ancient structure. The walls were lined with symbols, much like the ones from the beacon, their faint glow illuminating the path ahead. As they moved deeper, the air grew cooler, and the silence felt more profound, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The further they went, the more Ethan felt the weight of the place bearing down on him. It wasn't just a building, it was a tomb, a vault, holding secrets meant to stay hidden. He felt as though they were intruding on something sacred, something that had been waiting for centuries to be uncovered. Eventually, they came to a large chamber. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and atop it, a glowing orb, its surface swirling with colors Ethan couldn't quite comprehend. It was beautiful, almost hypnotic. "This is it," Zara said, her voice barely audible. Ethan stepped closer, drawn to the orb. As his fingers hovered above it, a strange sensation washed over him, something between awe and fear. "What does it do?" he asked, barely able to speak. Zara's eyes never left the orb. "It holds the answers," she whispered. "It holds everything." Ethan's mind raced. What could possibly be inside that orb? What kind of knowledge was locked within? Zara seemed to sense his hesitation and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's safe," she said softly. "We just need to unlock it." Ethan nodded, though part of him remained uncertain. There was so much at stake, and yet, in that moment, standing in front of that glowing orb, he felt a strange sense of inevitability. It was as if everything had led him here. As his hand gently touched the surface of the orb, a flash of light erupted from within it, blinding them both for a moment. When the light faded, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The chamber had changed. The walls were no longer solid stone. They were now projections, moving images, displaying scenes from what looked like the past. He could see images of ancient cities, towering monuments, and vast starships. Zara stepped forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. This is the history of my people," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan looked at her, his mind struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. The orb wasn't just a source of knowledge, it was a gateway to the past, a bridge to a time long forgotten. But as the images continued to unfold, something else caught Ethan's eye. Among the many scenes of history, one stood out, a group of humans, standing side by side with Zara's people, working together to build something. Something enormous. The realization hit him like a wave. "This is it," he whispered. "This is what we're meant to do. Work together." Zara turned to him, her eyes wide. "Yes," she whispered. "It's time." The chamber around them was silent, save for the faint hum of energy pulsing from the orb. Ethan's mind raced as the images continued to shift and change, revealing a vast history, one where humans and Zara's people had once worked side by side. The towering structures they built together, the technology they shared, and the harmony between the species felt almost impossible now, given how distant that past seemed. But the truth was undeniable. This was the key. This was the purpose of their journey. "We were once allies," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the projections. But something happened. Something changed. Ethan turned to her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "What changed?" Zara's eyes were fixed on the images, but her mind seemed far away. "War," she said simply. "My people, we became afraid. Fear turned to distrust, and distrust turned to hatred. Our worlds drifted apart." She paused, and for the first time, Ethan saw the pain in her eyes. "We forgot what we had built together. We chose different paths." Ethan stepped closer, his hand hovering just above her shoulder. "Zara, we can still rebuild. We can start again. This connection between us, this is proof we can do it." Zara looked at him, her gaze searching his face for something. She didn't speak for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "I want to believe that," she said quietly. "But I don't know if my people will." Ethan's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. "We can try, Zara. We have to try. If we don't, everything we've just seen in this chamber, everything it represents, will be lost." She hesitated, then placed her hand on the orb once more. The light from the projections flickered, casting shadows across her face. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Ethan looked around the chamber, his mind spinning with possibilities. "Now, we take this message," he said firmly, "and we go back. We find a way to show your people. And we show mine." Zara nodded slowly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "But where do we start?" Ethan glanced back at the map that had been projected earlier, now dimming in the wake of their conversation. He stepped toward it, studying the distant location. "We start with the coordinates. We take this knowledge back to those who can understand it. We find the ones who still believe in what we used to have, in the power of what we could be." Zara followed his gaze, her expression hardening with resolve. "And what if they don't believe us?" "Then we show them," Ethan replied, his voice steady with purpose. "We make them see what's possible. The air in the chamber felt heavier now, charged with the weight of their decision. The images from the orb flickered one last time before slowly fading, leaving them in the dim, silent room. It was as if the structure itself was waiting for them to make the next move. "We leave at first light," Ethan said, determination settling in. Zara nodded, her gaze firm, and for the first time since they had started this journey, Ethan saw the weight of centuries lift slightly from her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. Together, she said, a quiet promise in her voice. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would return to their worlds and make them see the possibility of unity again. They had the knowledge. They had the will. And now, they had each other. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Ethan felt the stirring of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could create something new. Something better. And that, perhaps, was worth everything they had just discovered. The desert night settled over the ancient temple like a blanket of cold glass, the stars sharp and bright overhead as Ethan and Zara stepped out into the open air. The silence was almost too perfect, too still, as if the world itself was waiting for their next move. Ethan adjusted the strap of his pack and glanced back at the entrance of the structure, its stone carvings glowing faintly from the energy of the orb inside. "We should rest for a moment before heading back," he said quietly. His breath formed a thin cloud in the cooling air. Zara nodded, settling beside him on a smooth rock overlooking the dunes. For a long moment, neither spoke. The desert stretched for miles, shimmering under the moonlight like sheets of silver dust. Ethan stole a glance at Zara. Her expression had softened, the worry lines on her forehead easing as she looked out at the horizon. The glow from the distant moons reflected off her blue skin, giving her an almost ethereal presence. "You seem calm," he said gently. Zara exhaled slowly. "Because for the first time, I can see a path forward." She paused, turning to face him. "Seeing the past, seeing what our two kinds once built together, it changed something inside me." Ethan understood. He felt the same. The images from the orb were seared into his mind, humans and Zara's people standing side by side, working together, smiling together. Not as strangers. Not as enemies. As partners. "I wish everyone back home could have seen it," Ethan admitted. "It would change everything." Zara smiled faintly. "That is why we must take this back. Even if it is dangerous. Even if some do not want to listen." Ethan could sense the conviction in her voice. She had found clarity, a kind of hope he had not seen in her before. "Zara," he said softly, "why were you chosen to come here in the first place?" "Why you?" Zara looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of her sleeve. "Because I questioned things," she said quietly. "Because I asked why our people distanced themselves from yours. Because I did not accept the fear my elders tried to teach." She looked up at him again, her eyes bright in the moonlight. "Some thought I was reckless. Others thought I was foolish. But a few believed I might understand what they could not." Ethan's chest tightened with something warm and unfamiliar. A sense of admiration. A sense of connection. "Well," he said softly, "I am glad you were the one who came. I do not think anyone else could have gotten us this far." Her gaze softened. "And I am glad you found me in the desert," she said, her voice nearly a whisper. "If you had not been there, I would not be standing here now." A gentle breeze moved across the dunes, lifting a curl of her silver-blue hair. Ethan felt the moment settle around them, delicate and fragile. Not romantic, not charged, just profoundly human. A connection formed in the quiet spaces between their words. "We should rest," Zara said finally, though her voice carried a softness he had not heard before. "Tomorrow will be hard." Ethan nodded. "Tomorrow everything changes." They sat together under the stars, two figures from distant worlds, united by an ancient message and a shared truth. The desert night wrapped around them in silence, and for the first time since they began this journey, Ethan felt something like destiny settling gently on his shoulders. Not a burden. A calling. The morning came with the soft light of the rising sun painting the desert in hues of orange and gold. Ethan and Zara had barely slept, but there was no time to rest now. The path back to the outpost stretched ahead of them, and they both knew that every step forward was a step toward something far bigger than they had ever imagined. Ethan adjusted the weight of his pack, feeling the cool desert breeze against his face. The air was dry, yet it carried the scent of the earth, a reminder of the vast, untouched world around them. Zara walked beside him, her step steady and purposeful, her gaze focused on the horizon. "We'll make it back," Ethan said, his voice steady. He wanted to reassure her, but he wasn't sure if the journey would be as simple as that. Zara nodded, her expression unreadable. "We have to," she said softly. There was a quiet determination in her words, a resolve that made Ethan believe she would do whatever it took to see this through. As they walked, the weight of their discovery hung between them. They had uncovered something ancient, something that could reshape everything they knew about their worlds. The orb had shown them the past, but it was more than that. It had shown them a path forward, one that they could walk together. But there was still so much left unanswered. Who else knew about this? Who else would seek the knowledge they had uncovered? And more importantly, what would happen when they returned? "Zara, what happens if we fail?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara stopped walking, turning to face him. Her eyes were wide, but there was no fear in them. Only a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from within her. "Failure is not an option," she said simply. "We have come too far to turn back." Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of her words settle on him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing: he couldn't do this without her. "Then we'll keep moving forward," he said, his voice steady. Zara smiled, though it was a small, fleeting thing. "Yes." Together. They continued walking, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable, but comfortable, as if they had both accepted what lay ahead. The journey back was long, but there was a sense of purpose now, a sense of destiny that had not been there before. When they finally returned to the outpost, they found it just as they had left it. The workers were busy with their tasks, unaware of the discovery Ethan and Zara had made. But that wouldn't last long. They were about to change everything. As they approached the main building, Zara turned to Ethan, her expression serious. "We need to share this with the leaders. They need to see what we've found." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was time. Time to reveal what they had discovered. Time to bring their people together. "Let's do it," he said. And with that, they walked into the heart of the outpost, ready to share the knowledge that could change the fate of their worlds. It was the beginning of something new, something that would require courage, hope, and a willingness to believe in the impossible. But Ethan was ready. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't walking this path alone. Together, they would face whatever came next.